Welcome to the Exchange Podcast, a podcast focused on speaking to interesting and inspiring people so that we can learn and grow through the exchange of ideas. My name is Martin Prinsley, and today I'm honoured to be joined by Professor Matteo Iannizzotto. Matteo's path to Durham has taken him from Florence to London, Rome and Oxford. After studying the Italian equivalent of PPE in Florence, he moved into economics, completing a master's at Birkbeck University, London, and a doctorate at Oxford University before joining Durham in 1999. He would go on to play a central role in shaping Durham's PPE program, while building a reputation as a dedicated teacher with a distinctive voice. Beyond the TLC, he is a keen student of Cold War history and the owner of a 1959 Soviet-built Jeep that served with the East German Army until its dissolution. Matteo, you are a very interesting gentleman.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Exchange.
Thank you.
I'd like to start right at the beginning.
Okay.
Growing up on the streets of the beautiful city of Florence,
Thanks.
what did you want to be growing up as a child?
Okay, I think there's an evolution. As a child, you shift in what you want to do. By the time I had a passion at school, I had a passion for philosophy. Mm-hmm. I read classics and philosophy at school. So philosophy was what I wanted to do at school. But that was not practical. It was not something that was leading to a definable profession. So I changed my tack. And then the university effectively the equivalent, why I did the equivalent of the PPE degrees, that was the route into the diplomatic service. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a diplomat.
Okay.
Which in the end doesn't happen.
Yes.
Life is like that.
Yes.
There are various forks in the road. At a certain point, you take one road rather than the other one, and that did not happen.
And you wanted to be a diplomat growing up. Was that shaped by, what shaped that growing up?
Many things. I mean, I think the extent to which a diplomat has to be, yes, a generalist, but has to understand the deeper questions and be able to frame an argument to an extent that his interlocutors can go forward, appealed to me. There was a way of understanding how things worked from a variety of perspectives, not a single one.
Okay. Were you exposed to diplomacy as a career growing up?
I met diplomats, because that was my interest when I was at university. I couldn't manage to find the diplomats I could interview or not. So that, yes, Italian diplomats, I stress, not. Later on, I've met British diplomats, but not at the time. Definitely not at the time.
You met the British diplomats when you came to England, or?
Largely, yes.
Yes. So you grew up in Italy in the 1970s and 1980s?
Yeah, okay. The 1970s was very young. I was a child.
Okay.
Yeah. You have to remember, I was born in 1968.
Yes.
So the 1970s, I was, by the end of the 70s, I was 12. So yes, I do remember certain things, yes. But it's...
Well, it was the anni di piombo, or the years of lead.
Yes.
Did that shape you again? Do you feel that shape?
Well, sorry, there are certain things I remember. As a child, I remember the day that Aldo Moro, the president of the Christian Democrats, was kidnapped. That I do remember. I remember certain things that happened then. Did it shape my life? No. By the time, because I can't, well, as a child, you're not exactly politically active. I mean, you can read things, but you're not completely political. By the time I could say to have been politically interested and active, that would have been the tail end of my school years or the university level. So we are literally talking the end of the 80s, yes. Because in 87 I left school. So he's the end of the 80s when we are talking about this. The only film by that stage was a scar in Italian political life. It still carried the weight because there were a number of people with whom I had interactions at university that somehow harken back to that tradition, to harken back to that point of view. And then wasn't sure, shall we say, because I did not.
So you went to university in 87?
Yes, November 87 when I started university.
And you ended up studying what exactly?
Well, the course we had, as I said, is the equivalent of the PPE degree by Italian standards, was basically can be described, because it was especially framed for the diplomatic service, as a combination of economics, international law, and what by Italian terms is called contemporary history, and in the UK would be called politics. It was, for us, it was contemporary history.
And what drew you to that combination? The interdisciplinary nature?
Yes, yeah, that was the. But then it was a design route. I mean, there were different routes within the same faculty that took you different ways. If you wanted to, you could do more sociology. I didn't. If you wanted to, you could do more political science, and I didn't. The one I specifically selected was intended for international relations. It's and the diplomatic service in particular. It was that if you looked at the selection criteria and the interview course for entering diplomatic service, you could see that there was this match with the particular route that I took. The faculty I was in is the Cesare Alfieri, the political science faculty of Cesare Alfieri. It was designed as a copy of l'École Libre des Sciences Politiques in Paris.
So you ended up, well, you're an economics professor. How did that come about?
Chiefly because of one man, and that man is Mario Draghi.
Who is Mario Draghi?
Well, and now we have lost count how many things we have to say about him. When I met him, he was just a professor, but he wasn't just a professor. He had been on leave to be one of the directors of International Monetary Fund, if I recall. The World Bank. I'm wrong. Okay, so he came back, and because he had another government problem, so that's the difference of what he was doing. Okay, but in the meantime, what he did is he started teaching international economics in Florence, and that made all the difference for me and for so many others. I mean, it was
it
a game changer.
Teaching? Was it?
Both, everything. I mean, it was everything. It was the teaching too. To give you an idea, at the time, very few of my fellow students were being proficient in English. He managed somehow, because he was the one who do this, to teach on an English written textbook. It was the Krugman-Obsfeld textbook in international economics, without massive upheavals, riots, or whatnot, that otherwise for anybody else would have happened. But he managed to do this. In terms of teaching, he was beyond excellent.
Yes.
His clarity. I mean, it was one of those things that there are so many things he managed to convey. And many of those things were extremely complex, had complex interactions, but when you were taught by him, you knew that you were making progress on a different level. And that, I mean, his examples to a certain extent that made me think, well, I could try to be something like that.
And from so he was your supervisor as well?
Briefly. I can't.
Do you ever try and take how he taught you and apply it in the way you teach today as a lecturer?
Oh, definitely. Oh,
yeah.
Good Lord, definitely. I mean, sorry, as far as teaching are concerned, he's one example. The other example I try to emulate is my econometrics professor at Birkbeck. Because, it was effectively, there are two different styles of teaching, definitely, but Ron Smith is beloved by many generations of Birkbeck students as an econometrics professor. Econometrics, as you might imagine, is a very dry subject, and it can be something very off-putting. Somehow, Ron Smith managed to make it engaging, managed to make people follow him, managed to make things that are genuinely complicated doable. It could be broken down in a way that was approachable. And that, the two of them Draghi and Ron Smith are definitely if I had to single out one, my ideal mentors and how I teach, the other two.
Okay.
No question.
And then following university, what did you do then?
Okay, the path there is where it gets broken, okay? Because effectively what happened was that I decided not to apply for the diplomatic service. I decided instead to do one thing that I didn't think would come off. I applied for a specific scholarship by the Bank of Italy, the Italian Central Bank. This was extremely difficult to get because effectively everybody applied for that one. Every economics graduate applied for that one. Because I was not coming from straight economics, I didn't think I would get it, but I did, incredibly enough.
That gave you the edge.
That created a situation that it was a lot of money for starters. It paid for the masters at Birkbeck, but also created another opportunity because there was an option with that scholarship, and the option was via an interview, which was easily the toughest interview I've ever had in my life. They could also offer you a place of employment at the bank, which is what I did. I did win that interview. It was the toughest I ever did.
What was difficult about it?
Oh, the attitude of the chief interviewer. Well, sorry, to give you an example, when you're doing an interview, people try, most people, not him, will try to put you at your ease. Okay, so they will ask you some preliminary question and try to gain your footing, gain some confidence. No. So what he did is he would ask questions, and some of these questions were quite tricky ones.
Yes.
And the nanosecond he understood that I knew the answer, he would stop me and go on. So at no stage could I gain any confidence, any footing of, and it's just, it's upsetting, that kind of, so this, so we can move on. Mm-hmm. That was the toughest. He later became the governor of the Bank of Italy. At the time he was the chief of the so-called studies department, but effectively in the hierarchy, the internal hierarchy of the Bank of Italy, that was the most important department because everybody of the higher order came from that service, from that department.
Did Mario Draghi at all influence your decision to join the Bank of Italy?
No. Well, I mean, yes, in the sense that it is his example that made me go down that route, but he personally, no. You have to remember, sorry, I haven't explained this, but by the time I came to do the dissertation, for my undergraduate dissertation, yes, Mario Draghi had to resign from being professor because he became the Director General of the Treasury, and therefore he could not be an employee of the state twice by being a professor. Yes. So Mario Draghi, in fact, only supervised the beginning of my dissertation, but not thereafter. So he had no real role in that.
So what pulled you towards the Bank of Italy then?
Oh, because the Bank of Italy was, probably still is, the most prestigious public institution in Italy. Sorry, this you don't know, but at the time, here we're talking about the 1990s. 1990s are a moment of political upheaval in Italy. There were corruption scandals and so on and so forth. Yes. Okay, so at the time when the then president of the Republic had to fall back on another figure that would command international respect, he chose the governor of the Bank of Italy. There are a string of high-flying personnel of the Bank of Italy that have made it into the highest echelon of the highest positions of Italian government. And you can say that Draghi eventually followed the same path to a certain extent. It was, and probably still is, the most respected public institution in Italy.
Okay. And so then you joined the Bank of Italy. It must have been a great experience.
No. No, I'm afraid not. I hated every single minute.
From the get-go?
More or less. Indeed, I've routinely said that every now and then there's something I don't like in Durham, but it takes 3 seconds to think I'm under the bank of the and the sun shines again. I mean, institutions like this can have a lot of appeal, but the experience can be different, in part because they are extremely big institutions, so how you fit into that institution is an issue. And whether that is compatible with what you want to do or not is again a separate question. The Bank of Italy was an enormous institution with its own rigid hierarchy and no ability to accommodate any differences.
I don't see. Was the issue that it was mundane, or was it you felt like a cog in the machine of a large system?
Well, it was even worse than that. It was a nest of vipers.
Is it what, sorry?
A nest of vipers.
A nest of vipers, okay.
Yes, I mean, it's just it was just it was extremely unpleasant. I mean, effectively, the routine pastime was stabbing each other in the back. And I said, okay, this is not for me. I don't want to do the other.
So it was an almost political.
Yes, it was, because part of it was that positions of prominence were very few, far fewer than the people who might want to apply for them, and therefore you were forever jockeying for positions. I used to say that regardless of the question, however mundane, however stupid the question, you needed to give the most, even if it was, do you want sugar in your coffee, the most misleading answer possible, because you didn't know at what stage that answer could be used against you. So, I did like that.
So how long did you stay at the Bank of Italy?
Not even 2 years.
No.
It's less than that. It's January 95 to September 96. Then I applied for leave of absence so that I could pursue my doctorate.
The doctorate or?
The doctorate, yes. I had the master by then. I'd done the master, so I had done the master at Birkbeck. I was told by Ron Smith, and then I got back. So what you have is that interlude of nearly 2 years in Rome, not quite, before I returned to the UK.
So you left in midway through 96?
September 96.
And a few years later, the European Central Bank was created. Do you ever wish you stayed?
No.
To be in the institution?
No, absolutely not. Because, I have friends, I have colleagues who have stayed, yes. So I know the process, how it happened. If anything, that created a further echelon of lots of people spectacularly qualified jockeying to get into the higher echelon. So it creates a further opportunity for internal politics and internal stroke external, because then, as you can imagine, it becomes the competition with the other national central banks. And I would never have wanted to stay in the Italian central bank. And it was already clear by the time I was about to go that the game would have changed from trying to get into the higher position of power within the Bank of Italy to trying to get into the ECB. That was already changing. Mm-hmm. And then the competition would have been with the French, with the Germans, and so on. And at that stage, competition becomes extremely difficult. So no, I would never have wanted to do that.
Well, I suppose this question might be a bit redundant, given that you weren't in the country. But so Italy was one of the founding members.
Yeah.
How did it feel, that shift from an Italian economic perspective?
Okay, so here we have to distinguish, and we have to go back to how things were at the time. I used to teach European economics, okay? So I used to plainly say, which is true, we all knew that was the case. The Maastricht criteria, there were, in particular the fiscal criteria, were designed to, the purpose was to establish who could be a member of the euro. And if it's plain to see that those criteria were designed to keep Italy out. Because there was a design, there was a specific mindset which is deeply monetarist in the Maastricht Treaty and in the thinking behind the institution of the European Central Bank. And the monetarist setting was, if the debt is too high, eventually it will have to be monetized. Monetization will lead to inflation, and this we don't want. Effectively, the situation was, at the time, was of a high percentage of debt to GDP of the Italian, and therefore that was effectively the point was that there was a clause in the Maastricht Treaty, in the institution of the ECB, I think it was the European Monetary Institute as it was at the time, that a prohibition from monetizing the debt or the deficit of any member country. But the notion was that this prohibition was dynamically inconsistent, because if it came to a situation in which the Italian debt would be at stake, then the European Central Bank would find itself in an impossible position and therefore would have to monetize the debt. So the notion was to say, we are not going to admit to the euro countries that could put the European Central Bank in a position to have to monetize. The story has to be understood in that context. The efforts, in particular, by the government of Romano Prodi, that shifted the dynamics, but the criteria were more complex. It wasn't just a percentage point; it was also how fast the rate of change was going. Okay, so the fact that Romano Prodi managed to obtain figures that effectively he was at the time the prime minister. That created a situation whereby Italy could make it. You have to understand the Italian perspective as far as European integration is concerned, and that is true throughout the 1980s and 1990s, is the fear of being left behind. The fear of a Mediterranean drift that would take it to being comparable to a country it doesn't want to become compared with, and lashing itself onto the faster, more dynamic, more modern, generally speaking, Northern European countries.
Yes.
So you can call it fear of missing out, whatever you want, but it is a fear of being left behind. Joining the euro and being able to be a founding member of the euro meant we had made it. Yes. We had not been left behind. We were founding members, and that strengthened also the pride and the how should I put it, the feeling that Italy had been a founding member of the European community to start off with, and therefore being part of the next chapter of European integration was essential.
So you mentioned the Northern Europe, more economically developed at the time. Why did you decide to come to UK universities?
Sorry, UK universities is sorry, there's no question about that.
Is it the best?
I would say so. I mean, if the usual question, what would you do if you go back? If you could go back, I would apply to UK university for doing my undergraduate degrees. Definitely, I have no question that I'm 100% biased, but I have no question that the system under which I teach is better than the system under which I was taught.
In England?
Yes. No question. Mm-hmm. No question about that.
So then how did you...
Indeed, if I may be permitted to say, one of the first things one of the feelings that I had to overcome when I first started teaching was the underlying envy for my own students. Because, I can't explain it in any other way. It's effectively... I kept feeling, I wish I had had what they have, because they can ask me questions I couldn't. It's well, you know, the Italian system was of numbers that cannot be comprehended.
Of students?
Yes.
Yes.
And consequently on the environment and the relationship with the teaching staff that was in general extremely distant. And partly because the numbers were such that these people, I don't blame them, but the fact that you couldn't do anything else than trying to put people off because they couldn't answer.
So how did you end up in Durham University?
Oh, sorry, forgive me, because that what happens is this would be familiar to everybody. In the latter stages of the doctorate, what they do, you apply to everything that happens that is available under the sun. And then it depends. I mean, I don't mean it disrespectfully, but the fact that you have to, because there's no other way of going about it. Obviously, you might say that there are certain universities, you might be selective, you might be able to be selective, but not necessarily can you be selected. So, and remember, this is before there was an email around that told you jobs at .c.uk or something like this, that they gave you, there is this position available, this position available. And I applied left, right, and centre and everything, etc. I did, can't remember how many interviews, something like 8. Not all of them went well. Many times because it was my fault. Being interviewed is an acquired skill. You learn with experience. Not all the time you did well. There are several interviews that I can honestly say that I didn't do.
Well, you were trained by a Bank of Italy interview.
Well, no. It was a different style it was a totally different style of questioning. Not as aggressive, definitely not. But again, then there is a question of how you put yourself, how you present what you have done, not being too arrogant or not, and everything. And you know, I didn't get certain jobs. Some jobs is just as well I didn't get because they were temporary jobs. This one was actually the best one of the lot.
Yeah.
So there's no accident that I got. I'll tell you one thing as a laugh. Okay, I was interviewed for a temporary position. I think the fellow was going on sabbatical or something like this at I think it was Trinity College, Cambridge.
Okay.
And I was it Trinity or King's? I'm mixing them up. And now, whatever,
One of
get
the
the
colleges,
gist.
yes.
So the point is, I was introduced into the room where there was the interviewing panel. This is a college position, not a university position. Okay. And the senior tutor introduced me to the members of the panel. The name of the last one made me gasp a bit because it's about pricing economics. Sir James Smith-Lees. But I came out of that interview feeling that I had dealt with gentlemen. And that's, if you want to know, that's also the style of interviewing. Not aggressive at all. Let me talk. Understanding, well, this is a younger colleague. We don't have anything to prove, so we can let him talk.
Yes.
We can just understand what he's.
Do you think it's a difference in institution or a difference in country, as in Italian versus English, in terms of the interview?
Oh, sorry, I had aggressive interviews in Britain too.
Okay.
So I think I think that they could afford to be magnanimous because they had nothing to prove. And that's why I said that they were gentlemen of a higher order.
Okay. And then you came to Durham
Yes.
University. What did you start doing?
Oh, I pretty much, I'm still teaching the second year macro course that I started teaching in Durham when I arrived. It is mine. I mean, things have changed, obviously, in a number of ways. The colleagues with whom I share it have changed, obviously, but I'm still doing second year macro. Second year macro has been mine since 99. Not exclusively mine, but sometimes exclusively mine, but it has been mine ever since. And it is obviously, Durham history varies, but at a certain point, more than 10 years ago, a colleague retired and I volunteered to take over the macro part of the first year module, which you have been subjected to, poor thing. And that has created my opportunity to achieve vertical integration between the two modules. Hence the notion that, the first lecture of the second year is I live under the delusion that you remember what I told you last year.
Yes, that might not be.
It is a cherished delusion. I don't.
Yes.
I don't want to depart from that.
So when I was looking into your research interests, it said that it's exchange rate economics and the history of monetary economics.
Yes.
I imagine your time at the Bank of Italy influenced that, or where do you think was the source of those interests?
Okay, exchange rates, if you want to go back, goes back to Draghi and international economics, because that is the part that goes back to that. My doctoral dissertation was entirely on exchange rates. To be precise, it was in the European exchange rate mechanism, so it was all European exchange rates. So that is the route that goes through that.
Yes.
I can't say the Bank of Italy enters into that at all, because nothing of what I did there was related to that.
Okay.
Then, as always, what happens is life is like that. Things evolve. At a certain point, your interests shift. My doctoral dissertation was primarily an econometric one. Now I don't do that.
Oh, I suppose it was econometric from the, what was it called? Birkbeck University.
Yes.
Yes. Well, as a student in your first year macro classes, it's semi-evident that you tend to prefer the ideas of John Maynard Keynes. Why Keynes specifically?
Okay, sorry, can I go back a touch? Okay. With the financial crisis,
yes,
there also came a realization for many of us that the theoretical framework of economics and the notions the markets were always right, and the theory built about arguing how they were always right, could not be sustained, could not be understood anymore, could not be held anymore. There are extreme versions of that, the efficient market hypothesis and whatnot, etc., etc. Now, at the time, I had the idea of creating a first-year module on the history of economic thought. And that is, I don't claim it to be in any way, shape or form original. It is in a way, common reaction, so to speak. Things have gone wrong in the world economy, and that those things challenge the established paradigms of economics. And then many people realized that the paradigm is not unique. There have been dissenting voices in the past, and that those dissenting voices had some value. Okay, so that's where I said, well, we need to do this. And as it happens, I had two excellent colleagues who are now retired who said, oh yeah, we want to do this. So the idea of introduction of history economic thought was mine. So we did this. One of them, initially I did certain things, never really, but one of these colleagues, the other one retired. And that meant that Keynes came to be part of what I needed to do, to cover. And I thought I knew what Keynes had said. Mm-hmm. And then I realized I didn't. Because the more I read, I realized the more I realized that what I thought I knew was the translation of Keynes. Keynes is not an easy one to read. So what people have done has sort of translated in their own terms. And in many cases, many have argued this is the betrayal. There are several things that are revolutionary, that are insightful in Keynes. They are not stated in the best possible way. There are so many ways in which he's exasperating. Okay, he can be very, very exasperating. I think it's a feeling that many Keynes scholars would have. Why did he do things this way? But if you take the effort, then there is a reward that is waiting for you. That is worth having, rather than taking the shortcut of the simplifications that over the years have been made to the general theory and others. Okay, I'll give you one example because otherwise you won't understand me. The standard question: if you could bring Keynes back to life, what would you ask him? Why would you? What is it that you would ask him if you could have him with a neutral board or something like this? What is it? Well, I can tell you what I would ask him. Why didn't he draw the diagrams? It is so exasperating, so difficult, because you read pages and pages and pages in the general theory. It is quite obvious that he has in mind a diagram, and he never draws it. There is one diagram in the general theory, and it is not on his theory. It is one he's rejecting, and that is so maddening. And when you start, when I started researching, I got in touch with phenomenally more prominent and more learned Keynesian scholars than I can ever be. Victoria Schick is a classical example, now no more, unfortunately. I kept asking, but Keynes was referring to these, but are these standard diagrams? Are they to be found in Marshall? No, none of this was to be found anywhere.
So he created his own, perhaps?
They were in his mind, they are on the page, because as you follow the words, you think, he's evidently thinking of a diagram, but the diagram is not drawn. And that creates a phenomenal degree of ambiguity, and has has effectively created the possibility of misinterpretation.
Yeah.
I'll give you one example. One of the classical stories you read all over the place is that Keynes concentrated on demand and disregarded the conditions of supply. Okay, you read the actual general theory, and you will find mention of aggregate supply all over the place. So that's not true. Okay, and it isn't true. And actually, the derivation and the shape of the aggregate supply curve is an issue that has to be worked out. So if he had actually had a diagram that said aggregate demand and aggregate supply, it wouldn't have been so easy for people to say, oh, he disregarded conditions of supply. He didn't. He most definitely didn't. And the other one is, he assumed that prices were constant. No, he didn't. He actually did. There's no way he did that.
Do you often argue with Keynesian skeptics? Within the department, maybe?
As you know, Peter Wagner and I shared the office, and we agreed not to be there at the same time. I mean, we agreed not to talk about Keynes because then we would entangle with this. But it's the issue that arises is if you actually read the man, then you see not all these things. No, they're not there. Then all these things that are being told, fixed prices, disregarded supply, and so on and so forth, they're not there. So he didn't say these things. He was made to say them afterwards. Translations of the general theory cut corners because and decided to summarize things in a way that a few schedules of a few equations could do, and cut the rest. There's so much more, but what there is, the part 4, the inducement to invest, is the most difficult one. It's by far the most difficult one. It's also the most rewarding, but you have to bang your head against it. And it is extremely difficult. And at several stages you ask yourself why he wrote things that way. And there's a wealth of Keynes scholarship that has happened afterwards that I I found extremely stimulating and interesting. Once you go down that path, once you start seeing it as the radical revolution that it was, and it is in the first instance is an epistemological revolution. It comes from the notion we cannot assume that we know the path of the economy in the future. We don't know, then many things change, and that is so engrossing. Sorry, I get carried away. I know.
Oh, you said.
I said that. I'm sorry, I get carried, but I do. I really think that it is. And for that matter, forgive me. There are those who have followed his path, so to speak, who have actually made the effort of reading him rather than the translation of Keynes. And the name of Hyman Minsky is an obvious one. Okay. Minsky was a dedicated follower of Keynes, and his work on the financial instability hypothesis had largely been forgotten, except in the confined circles of the post-Keynesian school, heterodox school. But it became mainstream and all the talk of town with the financial crisis. But I would make the claim. I'll make this claim every time. You can't understand the financial instability hypothesis if you have not made the effort of understanding Keynes in the first instance.
Okay, so Matteo, briefly, let's talk about the political and economic state of the world. The debt to GDP ratio now sits at 237% in Japan, 125% in the US, depending what time you read, and 101% in the UK. So there is a theory that when governments carry very high debt burdens, as evident in these countries, they constrain their own central banks, because the fiscal cost of these higher rates will become economically burdensome or painful. And one can by default say when it's economically burdensome, it can become politically unpopular as well. And the question is, do you think we're seeing some version of that today?
Well, to an extent, definitely. I mean, it changes from country to country, but definitely that is the case. And one of the issues that we've come to realize is that these things are interconnected, okay? So there is an extent to which you cannot separate the government debt and the fiscal position of the government debt and its own central bank. Because the central bank, however much we have emphasized the independence of the central bank, is actually a government institution. The ability to issue a currency, it is an act of sovereign power, and that rests with the government. So the notion of the central bank being totally independent of the government cannot be. Knapp in the early 1900s says money is the creation of the state, or something like this. Okay, and this creates a tension, and this is particularly true in a world that is disconnected from commodity values. Okay, i.e., with the abandonment of the gold standard. Okay, when you have a currency that is issued a costless currency, then you have an issue on the size of the debt.
Yes.
Because effectively what you have is forever the possibility of that debt being repaid in costless currency. What you have there is a tension that cannot be resolved. Okay? And it's a question of striking a balance. So are we seeing this? Yes, to an extent. But it is, can we do without it now? The return to the gold standard is a bad idea. A bad idea. And we know that. The gold standard that constrained economic growth, global economic growth, in a way that could not be managed. And it would be an issue nowadays, much more nowadays than it was at the time. Here there is a tension. The gold standard created the stability and hence predictability.
Yes.
And that was good, but also constrained potential growth. So what you want to have is a situation in which you can grow but still remain credible. And this is possible for some currencies, the reserve currencies of the world, the euro, the yen, the dollar, obviously. But it's not possible for everybody. And that, again, this is why the question depends on the country we are talking about. There are countries that can afford to be in a situation in a high level of debt to GDP because they have a currency that plays an international role, and other countries that can't afford that.
So
that is an extremely unequal situation. Yeah, that's true.
Sudan is also above 100% debt to GDP ratio. I suppose they're an example of a country that cannot function with this without influencing their currency values.
Okay, sorry, forgive me, I don't know enough about Sudan to comment about. There is an old saying that an economist cannot comment on the economic situation of the country unless he has at least flown over it. And I most definitely haven't. So I will not say a word about Sudan.
Oh, thank you, Matteo. So, you've been at Durham University for 27 years.
Yeah, in September it will be 27. Okay. Yes.
Well, 26 and 11.
Yes. Yes.
How has Durham or university in general changed in that period?
Well, there's an obvious answer. It relates to numbers. Okay, so when I started, I had second year macro was 140 students. Not that long ago, it was 360. Now there are various changes in the regulations because it has changed, but that's the kind of order of magnitude that we are talking about. Probably going forward next year. So that makes matters different. When I was at the time in a situation in which I could do the lectures and practically all the classes, that creates a situation where I could get to know practically all the students. Not all of them. Not always would I be in a situation to that. Now that's quite plainly impossible.
Yes.
So the numbers make a difference, that they do, definitely. Durham has also changed over the years. When I arrived in 99, as far as the student population is concerned, was primarily UK. There were some international students, but not that many. That changed substantially over the years. Obviously, there are further changes because before COVID, we had a substantial proportion of continental European students, not just overseas students from China, and that proportion of continental European has gone down quite a lot.
Okay.
At least in my experience. So these changes have been seen. Then obviously the numbers change how you can do things, how you can how you structure the number of emails you have to answer to, and everything. How you can do the exams, how you can cope with the questions. That has definitely changed.
And in the last 5 years, AI has started being more used.
Yes.
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 You don't seem too happy about that.
Yeah, so I confess to one thing. Okay, I confess to one thing. When something is very fashionable, I intensely dislike it.
Ooh.
Okay, so
your suit is very fashionable.
No, it's not. So I will become interested in AI once the bubble has burst and it's no longer fashionable to talk about it. I object to having AI shoved down my throat. I understand what people are doing with it, but just at several stages I am I'm confronted with the dangers of it, and I don't see that as the
Is that a personal decision in general? If people wear a certain type of shoe, you dislike wearing that shoe? Or is it more of an AI
no, sorry, it's entirely personal.
Okay.
It's entirely personal. They can wear whatever they want as long as I wear what
Yes,
I want.
what I'm saying though, you suggested that you don't want to try and get involved with this artificial intelligence technology because everyone is using it.
Yes. To an extent, you're right. Yes, I agree. It's a very irrational reaction, and I can't say I'm proud of it, but it's just how I feel. Something is very fashionable. I don't want to get it. And then I'll later on I'll grudgingly admit, he has some use. I'm sure he has. Okay, so yes, I can see that. For instance, if I had to write 300 words on something I really don't want to talk about, I really don't. Oh, that would be perfect. Yeah, but it's not. It's not how I want to, and it's not how I want to teach. I'll go further on one point. Okay, so I have some questions about what AI can do. Let me rephrase it. Sorry, forgive me. When I was, I've written 2 books. One is a textbook for. When I was writing, AI didn't exist at the time. So, but because writing for academic discourse is a difficult thing to do. So I looked around. It was an excuse for not writing this stuff. And I remember seeing a YouTube thingy about academic writing. And it was a program run by Chicago University. It might still be there. Okay. And this chap was effectively giving advice to doctoral students, junior academics, whatnot, on how to write. And he had before him a number of people coming from different subjects. And of all the things that I've heard, the one thing that stuck with me was you said the academic writing we are talking about is one that is defined by this characteristic. The stuff you're talking about is so complex that the process of thinking requires you to write. Mm. You cannot think just looking at the wall. You have to write it down. The writing and the thinking take the same form. The thinking is shaped by the act of writing. Okay, and I can understand why that is an issue at several stages, particularly in the more complicated parts of Keynes. I came to see how that was an issue. Okay, I can't see how AI is going to change that.
Yes.
Because even worse, I can imagine AI constraining that necessary thinking.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe I don't claim to know anything about this, but I just that's the issue I have.
Okay. So, we can move on then. I'll maybe ask later. You were, as of 6 years ago, PPE director.
Yes.
The undergraduate program.
I was for PPE program director for 12 years.
12 years. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, after those 12 years, do you see a greater value in doing a joint honours type degree like philosophy, politics, and economics over doing pure economics or pure politics, for example?
Okay, so that I think changes enormously. To be honest, it changes from the student himself, or the particular path that they choose to take in a joint honours degree. And this was true in PPE. I don't know how the regulations have changed since my time, but it was true even then that effectively within PPE people could specialize a bit more, less, and everything. So that will change quite a lot. I used to argue that perspective, particularly coming from philosophy, to an extent, political philosophy helped shape the economics, because there were certain connections that are obvious, particularly when one does history of thought of economics, that then would become evident. Yeah, the classical examples I used to have is Marx. Marx is not just an economist. Cannot be understood. There's no way you can understand Marx unless you confront the philosophy and unless you understand the political entrepreneur role that he had. For good or for bad, I'm not interested in that. And the same could be said, for instance, of von Hayek. So there are elements that add to that, and that makes the experience richer. But again, it depends what you want to do in that respect. It depends what kind of economist you want to be. For that matter, if as an economist what you want to do is economic forecasting, none of that will help you. I can't imagine that helping you. So if that's what you want to do, then the more econometrics you do, the better. But it all depends. I'm not that kind of economist.
I was talking to a friend who does PPE.
Okay.
And he said that he will never be as good at philosophy as a pure philosophy, never as good as politics as a pure politics student, and economics as well.
To an extent, yes. I mean, obviously, I'm biased and I come from the position of the economist. I can think of what an economist is, so I cannot comment about being a better or lesser philosopher on that. I think I would not presume to do that. My temptation would be to question the wisdom of what your friend has said. I vividly remember students who were passionately arguing for the very opposite. That by being PPEists, they could see beyond the confines of each of the three subjects.
What subtopics are going to be more important for the future of the field broadly of economics?
Oh, a number of them, and not all of which are to me, I can claim any interest or any degree of expertise. An obvious answer would be the environmental question. That is definitely going to dominate economics in a way that it hasn't done in the past. There are all manners of difficult questions there, and that is a field that is going to be. I mean, as economists, we are tempted to. How should I put it? We are tempted to assume that economic growth was the answer to everything. To a large extent, we still take that view, but economic growth comes sometimes at costs that are unacceptable, and then have feedbacks that are unbearable in terms of destruction of the environment. You name it, higher temperatures, and so on and so forth. So I can understand that being a field that will have an enormous impact in the future. Another one, again, in which I have no degree of expertise whatsoever, is if you understand economics as the interactions of humans in the ordinary business of life, of how to satisfy the needs of a life, then inevitably economics is rooted in human behavior. Human behavior is subject to biases, is subject to patterns that in economics we tend to disregard. Oh, that's psychology, we don't want to deal with that. Those are the bad social sciences that we don't want to give
behavioral.
Yes. What we tend to do is to create fictional individuals, the Homo economicus that does this, that, and the other, etc. And it is abstract from his context, and that's not possible. That's not more than not possible. It's misleading. So understanding how the social animal that these men is placed in that context, and that context shapes the economic decisions of that for me is a field that goes forward. There is I don't know if I've bored you with this, but there is Thorstein Veblen, who's in many cases an odd character. There is an essay on why is economics not an evolutionary science. If I can't remember, I think it's dated 1899 or something like this. So it goes back as far back as that. And there is a wonderful passage Veblen writes in a way that sometimes is very entertaining. Is just that he mocks what he called neoclassical economics. So describing what you have is this self-contained globule of desires that has no antecedent, no past, no future, nothing, and he's forever at rest, and when a shock happens, works out what to do. I mean, it's the utility maximization kind of story, and is not connected to anything else. There's no evolution. It is perfect as it is. I mean, a mockery. Yes, it is a mocking characterization, but it is distressingly recognizable of theoretical economics is like that. The absence of history, the disregard for the future, the notion that we all choose independently of others. We don't.
Yes.
We were talking about fashion earlier. How do you introduce fashion in economic theory? That's a complicated story because effectively you don't wear something because you like it. You like it because you have seen it, and that's the fashion, and that is the social interaction. That's largely outside of the standard micro model of economics, where effectively you work out your needs. That's what it is. And it misses the need of looking like everybody else, fitting in, that kind of thing. And that's the field where I think a lot more there's a lot more that can be done.
Behavioral and environment.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm curious, and looking back over your 26 years and 11 months as at Durham University, are there any students that you're particularly proud of?
Oh, too many to mention. Sorry, far too many.
Far too many.
Far too many to mention. Well, for them, if you want to know, in London, as I was in London on Saturday, I caught up with two of them.
Yeah.
So yeah, by all means. Again, in all this, what happens is there are students I remain in touch with, and others that like that I don't see anymore. But no, there are far too many.
Far too many. Yes.
And on this respect, can I stress one thing? Over nearly 27 years in Durham, I think I mentioned it in the preface to my book. There are so many things I've learned from my students. And this is not a joke. This is, there are several. I cannot possibly know everything, and I cannot possibly have read everything. And there are so many ways in which I cannot possibly have seen the same argument. And the fact that students have prompted me to look at things in a different way, have given me a question that I couldn't answer in the first instance, and I have learned that way. And I claim honestly to have learned from my own students. It's not the notion of teaching is one-way street. Is bogus. It's totally bogus. One of the great privileges is that I have the students that I have. So I've learned so much.
Well, outside of academia,
yes.
What other interests do you have?
Well, the two chief interests I have are rowing,
yes.
which I've done for how long, and do less of it now, and collecting rubbish. Particularly the militaria and legal stuff they collect. So that's the rubbish. I collect, and I have far too much of it. Yes, those are my two main interests. Yes.
Could you expand on the rubbish? Sorry, I think some of the audience might just hear rubbish and be confused.
Well, these are obsolete uniforms of obsolete militaria. The biggest piece of which is what you have already mentioned, is the biggest, heaviest, is this 1959 Jeep. So somehow I managed to get it keep going despite its efforts not to. So yes, so that's my hobby. That's what I do. I connect with other petrol heads like me, and we exchange notions. Oh, you could try tweaking the carburetor that way, or all kinds of extremely boring stuff. I can tell you. For anybody else, that would be extremely boring. But it's fun for me, and it makes a difference. One of the things that many people admire classic cars and say, "Oh, this is lovely," in a Jaguar type or the. And they say, "Oh, I would love to have one like that." Yeah, the one thing they don't know and don't understand is owning a vehicle like this. You can't just get in, turn the key, and go. That's not possible. It doesn't work that way. It probably never did, even when they were brand new. You need to know what's going on. You need to listen to noises. You need to think, "Oh, that might." So there is all that has to be learned, and it's not as if you can pay somebody to do it for you now, because you're the one who's going to drive it, and you're the one who's going to have the incentive to look for faults, to make it better.
So how did you end up getting the Soviet Jeep?
Oh, that was a search that lasted 6 years.
From what year? 2000?
I started in 2003, and I only managed to acquire it in 2009. And the real problem, more than finding the right vehicle, was finding the right seller. Because many didn't answer emails. At the time, it was the Germans I was dealing with, and evidently there was a generation of Germans, particularly in Eastern Germany, that had evidently some notion that answering emails was carcinogenic or some such thing. And then that has shifted, but finding the right seller was the most difficult thing. In the end, I did.
From which country?
Oh, he was in Germany. Well, the vehicle was produced in the Soviet Union, but then it was imported in the East German, in German Democratic Republic. God only knows when, and so was the East German military. And then, obviously, what happened? The East German military and all its assets were taken over by the Bundeswehr, the West German military, in 1990. And then progressively all this stuff was disposed of. So at a certain point, the chap I bought this vehicle from bought 16 of these in 96, if I remember rightly, from the agency, the disposal agency of the German, unified German government. They were effectively getting rid of all the stuff. So the vehicle was in Germany, which creates certain advantages, because I can't read Russian. I know enough German to get by, so the maintenance manual is in German, so I can cope with that. The certain plates have been replaced, so they're no longer in Russian, they are in German, so I can cope with that. So that's the advantage. Yeah.
Did you have to drive it back?
Oh no, sorry, the vehicle was not registered. So I went over with my other mad vehicle, which is an Land Rover, and an empty trailer. I came back with a laden trailer. Yeah.
You go down with one mad vehicle and come back up with two.
Well, that was the part of the fun. Yes, the Land Rover is modern by relatively standard, because it's 1988.
Oh, that's still quite old, yeah.
No, it's very modern. And the Land Rover is the main vehicle, but then it has the power to pull the trailer with the gas on top. So no, I don't. So again, sorry. The Soviet Jeep I have was designed in the late 40s, beginning of the 50s. there were basically no motorways in the Soviet Union at the time. Roads were dirt tracks at the best of times. The notion of being able to do 100 kilometers per hour or even 110 kilometers per hour was unthinkable. So you went at a very different pace. So it's a vehicle, an engine that is effectively built to tumble around at 66 kilometers, 70 kilometers per hour, at most 80 kilometers per hour, no more than that. Mm-hmm. In current traffic conditions, you're basically stationary, and it is extremely dangerous to be that slow. Mm-hmm. So indeed, I can tell you the most dangerous situations I've been in have been because I was so much slower than the rest of the traffic. And people don't realize that I can't go faster. It's not as if I can put foot down. It doesn't work that way. And that is true of so many classic vehicles. If I see many of my friends now carry and wonder whether I should do it too, if a yellow and amber flashing light or some kind of sign to try and alert people, this is as much as I can do. Pushing doesn't help.
And when's the last time you've driven it?
10 days ago. Something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I take it into the garage and I leave it for 4 months of the year because of the salt on the roads. But otherwise, it's every week or every 10 days I take it out for a spin. Yes,
it's necessary.
Yes, because these things they need using, they need reminding that they are meant to be driven. Yes, otherwise they'll develop faults.
You mentioned your love of rowing when you were at Henley last week. Have you rowed competitively before, or is it?
Competitively, I've never done anything particularly good. I'm not built that way, so I've never been particularly. The best I've done on rowing terms is more than 20 years ago. There is such a thing as the Boston Marathon. Boston in this country, UK. Okay. And it is a rowing marathon that goes from Lincoln to Boston. Okay, Boston's on the coast of Lincolnshire.
Your geography of England is better than mine.
Okay. There is 50 kilometers for your information. Okay. And I've done that, and I've won it the category in the novice double scull with a friend of mine in 2004, and we did it in 3 hours 55 minutes and 44 seconds. And I can tell you, when I got out of that boat, everything ached.
So stand.
It's just you imagine it's 4 hours sitting in a rowing boat.
But you did win.
We did win the category, yeah. And I think now it's getting more difficult to do because of the weeds, so it's more difficult to do that kind. But we did. That's the best I've done. Yeah. But I've never been a particularly competitive rower, so it's not, and it was never much my thing.
When did you first go to Henley?
Oh, that would have been 94.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it would have been, by construction, it would have been during my master. So July 94 is my best guess.
Have you been every year since?
Well,
try to.
I think it would be easier to calculate the times that I haven't been than the times that I have.
Yes, you have been a lot.
So there would be instances, a few years when I haven't been, obviously the COVID years, no. But it would be easier to work the exceptions rather than the other way around. Otherwise, I've always been, yes. There are friends that there's a friend in the United States, and we used to converge to go to that. Now there's my brother who comes over from Italy, so we go, yes, no, absolutely.
Okay. For the quick fire round, okay? What is your favourite place in the Northeast?
On the Northeast, it would have to be in Durham Castle. I've a soft spot. I lived there for 6 years.
In the castle?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
When I arrived in Durham, there were a number of us, there were so-called dons sets, a number of members of staff that were living in the castle, 6 of us. And I had 2 rooms in the keep. Durham Castle will have to be for me, yes.
I was going to say, and in Durham following. So how about outside of Durham?
Oh, outside, okay. Outside Durham,
Yeah, well, outside of Durham, what's your favourite place?
or I would say Blanchland.
Oh, sorry?
Blanchland.
What is that place?
Oh dear, you need to get out of Durham.
What is your favourite type of suit? Previously, it was the evening tailcoat. Is it still?
Oh, it certainly is. I would have to say, yes, no question about that. Yes.
I was going to
I have
ask.
6 of them.
6. It was 3 last time.
Well, things have evolved. I mean, okay, so to be fair, 2 I cannot wear. Okay? 1 is the very first one I acquired, and sadly I do not longer fit into it. But for sentimental reasons, I don't want to part with it. And the other one I bought it for my brother. So there are 4 in active service.
Okay. Where do you call home?
Oh, it would be here.
Okay, here in Durham, yes. And your favourite economics module to teach?
Oh, unquestionably second. I could not say second year macro.
Okay. Your favourite economist, but not John Maynard Keynes.
Oh, I'll go for Schumpeter.
And now this is a very important question to Durham students. Is Durham better than Oxford and Cambridge?
Okay, can I answer it in a different way? Okay, I don't know Cambridge, so I will not say anything about Cambridge, but I suspect it will be the same, okay, because certain things are identical. Oxford is not for everybody. There are many students, many excellent students I've had in the past that I don't think would have done very well at Oxford at all. Indeed, and I can't imagine they would have done that well at Cambridge either, because the structures are the same. The structure of teaching, in particular, the tutorial system in colleges, are, broadly speaking, similar. So I can't imagine they would have worked well. And I don't think, again, part of the issue, part of the things that are, for that matter, I'll go further. I'll say that I would not have coped well as a student in the Oxford system. Because for me, it takes time to learn. It takes time for what I read to sink in. I may have to read it again and again, and I have to have that time. The Oxford, I can't imagine the Cambridge system being any different, hasn't got that time. I remember a student at Oxford said that the term was 8 weeks of crisis management. And when I repeated that story at high table once, there was one of the law fellows who quipped, "Excuse me, where does the management bit come in?" And there's so much of that this is true on both sides, both students and academics. That basically the feeling of never having the time. That's, I can't imagine my faring well under that system.
Okay.
And I can imagine I can easily think of several students I know who were excellent here at Durham who would not have coped well under that system.
Okay, then the following question is, there's a term coined called Doxbridge, so Durham, Oxford and Cambridge.
Okay. Yes.
Would you be open to that change of Doxbridge rather than Oxbridge?
Well, out of Durham
You can
pride,
pass, you can pass.
Sorry, out of Durham pride, I would say yes, but
Doxbridge.
but to be fair, I mean there are a number of other, not just Durham, who would have a claim to being included. I mean, but let's be fair, okay? So there would be other universities who would have that claim.
Yes.
So you start with St Andrews and go on. So
It's an amusing discussion.
it is, yes.
So
As a joke, yes.
yes. I've got 2 final questions. If you have a message to first year PPE and economics students, what would that be? Joining in, say, September, October.
Read around. Is what I would say.
Okay, and many students have been graduated. So, what would your message be to those graduating this past?
Oh, that's easy. Keep in touch. I'm glad to receive messages say, there are, as I said to you, there are students who reach out and you don't remember me, and sometimes say, yes, I do. This usually happens because they want a letter of reference. They're going into accounting and then they have seen the light and decided not to. That kind of, after years of that, they decided to do something else. So yes, keep in touch with my there are all manners of oddities that happen that way.
Well, Matteo, thank you so much for this interview.
Thanks to you.
I've had great fun talking about everything. It's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks to you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.